Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Comprehensive D&D 5e Guides. My last guide was the Blood Hunter overview. Today I am going to go over the Blood Hunter orders, which is their subclasses. To kind of show how each one kind of fits into that overall Blood Hunter theme, and to kind of give you an idea of what each one does. There are technically 4 of them. Depending on how long this video is, I might just do the 3 that are included with the original PDF and leave the order for Order of the Lycan for later, simply because some of these are really there's just a lot to them, and I don't want this video to be like 4 hours long. So we'll see how it goes. So to kind of review what we talked about the Blood Hunter before. The Blood Hunter is really summed up, like all really well-designed classes, kind of summed up by the stuff that it gets in its first 2 levels, which basically translate to it will hurt itself to be able to damage enemies better, like Crimson Rite and the Blood Maledict. The entire purpose of the Blood Hunter itself is the idea that there's darkness everywhere. Darkness needs to be stopped, and every so often, you kind of have to become what it is that you hate in order to defeat it. So that's really what the Blood Hunter class is built under. And it also has the idea of knowledge is power. So being more knowledgeable about your foes allows you to be better prepared and better able to defeat them and destroy the darkness the way that you want to. So let's start with the first one, and I'll kind of show you how they all kind of go back to that idea. So the first order is the Order of the Ghost Slayer. This one, I think, as far as complexity, I think this one is probably the simplest to understand. There's not anywhere near as much as many choices that you have to make every single turn, or every combat or anything like that, like some of the other orders have. This one is very, very simple in the idea that the Order of the Ghost Slayer is exactly that, Ghost Slayer. They kill ghosts, and really any undead, and everything about this class is really designed to help you kill undead. So you could call this, there actually used to be a subclass, I believe it was either a Paladin kit or a Ranger kit. And it changed between editions, if I remember correctly. But it was called the Undead Hunter. And they got all these special abilities that made them really, really good against undead and kind of shit against everything else. With the Blood Hunter already the way that it is, and the default aspects of it, you're never really going to be because the Ghost Slayer focuses so much on undead. You might think that, you know, when you're not facing undead that they're significantly less useful. They're not. They just, when you are facing undead, a Ghost Slayer Blood Hunter is just a demon on the battlefield and off the battlefield. Like, they are just super, super good at doing this. So, so the first thing you get is you learn a new esoteric rite called the Rite of the Dawn, and basically it turns your sword into a lightsaber. No, it gives you radiant damage instead of the frost fire or I think it was lightning damage of the other one. So this gives you radiant damage, which is good because radiant damage does some interesting things to undead in general. Undead that regenerate generally can't regenerate if they've been hit by radiant damage. There are a few undead that actually have vulnerability to radiant damage. Radiant damage is very rarely a type of damage that a creature has resistance to, so that on its own is very useful. But this Rite of the Dawn also has some additional caveats because, again, the Ghost Slayer is about killing ghosts. So if you hit an undead creature with your Rite of the Dawn, it suffers additional radiant damage equal to your Wisdom modifier. Again, the Blood Hunter is really a Strength or Dexterity and Wisdom-based fighter. So having both of those high is always going to be good. For a Ghost Slayer, it's even more important to have your Wisdom score high because you're going to be doing additional damage. Normally, let's say you're using a Finesse weapon, you would hit with the Finesse weapon and do weapon damage plus your Dexterity modifier or Strength modifier, whichever is higher. With this, you also add your Wisdom modifier to that. And when you add in things like multi-attack that they get at level 5, that starts adding up really quick. And if you're dual wielding and you have both of them with Rite of the Dawn, that adds up really, really quickly. And you start doing massive amounts of damage. To give you kind of an idea, I have a ranger that I play. He's a dual whip wielding ranger. A whip does 1d4 damage. It's really not all that useful as a melee weapon compared to most other weapons. And because it's not a light weapon, you actually, to dual wield it, you have to take the dual wielder feat. So there's a lot of stuff I had to do to get this dual whip wielding ranger. But with it, he has a dexterity of 20, and he has multi-attack and dual wields. So every time he hits, no matter what I roll on the d4, I'm doing 15 damage just from my dexterity modifier because I have extra attacks. And then as long as I have the target hunter's mark, I also have a d6 and a d4. So in a single round of combat, he can do 3d4 plus 3d6 plus 15 points of damage. Which for and then when you add in Rite of the Colossus or the Colossus Slayer, because he's a hunter ranger, that adds another d8 on top of that. So he can do a significant amount of damage and actually hold his own with things like fighters and wizards that are doing crazy amounts of damage. The same is true about this. When you start adding these things, the more attacks you can make, the more powerful you're going to become. So that Rite of the Dawn works particularly well when you're dual wielding, or anything that adds extra attacks. Even taking a level or 2 of fighter so you can get Action Surge. I think that's their second level ability. Just doing that to get you extra attacks will benefit Rite of the Dawn. Because of that wisdom. Now, the other thing about Rite of the Dawn is at 11th level, you know how I said, well, against undead, they're super, super good, and then everything else, they're just not as good? Well, at 11th level, any creature you hit with your Rite of the Dawn suffers the additional radiant damage. So from 11th level on, it's not just undead. You kill everything real good. The next thing, 7th level, your blood curses become home to the fabric of a creature's essence. This is called Hollowed Veins. You'll remember I mentioned before, blood curses require the creature to have blood. With most undead, they don't have blood. Like skeletons have no blood. And it's up to the DM to decide whether the creature has blood or not. Things like a golem wouldn't have any blood. Constructs won't have any blood. With Hollowed Veins, it basically means they don't need blood for your blood curses to work. So that's another really, really useful thing, because now that is one of the limiting factors of the blood curses, is they have to be used on somebody that has blood. So this takes away one of the limiting factors and really gives Ghost Hunters the freedom to use those blood curses however they need to in order to ensure that they're able to fulfill the role that they want to fulfill. The other thing that's interesting, again, Ghost Slayer built on the idea of I super hate undead. When you target an undead creature with a blood curse, it must succeed on a Wisdom saving throw, based on the DC's based on your Wisdom, or it cannot attack you with an attack until the end of your next turn. So this is another action economy kind of thing. If you've got a bad guy coming towards you that's undead, and he has to use most or all of his movement to hit you, and there's nobody around, you can blood curse him, and it doesn't matter what blood curse you use as long as it affects him and he's undead. If he fails that DC, he can't make attacks against you at all. Not this turn or next turn. So you quite literally are immune to this guy until the end of your next turn, and from that until that point, you're kind of making him waste his actions because now he's right next to you and he can't do anything to you. Yeah, again, they're really, really good at killing undead things. Supernal Serge is one of the aspects of this that makes it just that hair's breadth away from being... this is one of those things that flirts with a little bit overpowered, and I think the way that that Matt limits it here is interesting. So basically what this does is when you use the attack action, you can make a weapon attack as a bonus action. So that actually can be helpful for a number of things. First of all, again, Blood Hunters use their bonus action for a lot of their blood curses and other things that they do. So bonus action is important, so this adds a little bit of choice. And what happens is when you make that weapon attack as a bonus action, you temporarily become spectral, which means until the end of your next turn, you can move through other creatures and objects as if they're difficult terrain. You turn into a ghost, and you can walk through walls, you can walk through creatures, things like that. If you stop inside, just like any other spell that grants you etherealness, if you stop inside something and then lose your etherealness, you'll take damage. Yeah, this adds a very interesting aspect of tactics to the battlefield, because by letting you be able to walk through walls and things like that, you can set up flanking when normally you wouldn't be able to. You can escape from places that normally you wouldn't be able to. You can get into places you normally wouldn't be able to, simply because you can turn into and walk through walls and things like that. So it's a really, really interesting ability. And then at the bottom it says you may expend a use of this feature as a bonus action instead of making an attack. That's the only thing that to me is slightly confusing about this. I think it means... and this is probably how I would rule it, because it doesn't make sense the other way. Instead, because in order to use this, you have to use the attack action. That's what it says. When you use the attack action, you can make one weapon attack as a bonus action, and you temporarily become spectral. If you don't want to make an attack, or you can't make an attack because maybe you're not in combat, but you need the spectral ability, you can just expend a use of this as a bonus action instead of making an attack. Maybe you're already in initiative or something, but you don't want to attack something for whatever reason, but you do need to get spectral. I think that's what he meant by it, is instead of using the attack action, you can just burn your bonus action and become spectral and be able to do that. So you don't always have to make an attack with it, because it might be that you want to use an item with your action, or it may be that you need to feed someone a potion or something like that with your action in order to do that, but you still need to be able to get somewhere. That's what I think it means. If I read it exactly as written, it sounds like you can either make an attack and become spectral, or just become spectral without making an attack, but you still use your bonus action to do it. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why wouldn't you make an attack if you're going to burn your bonus action anyway? So that's my reading of it. Matthew, if you actually see this, if you want to make a comment on exactly what that was supposed to mean, let me know. But I think it's mostly an idea of to allow you to use it outside of combat, or to allow you to use it when you can't attack for whatever reason. And then you can use the feature number time equal to your wisdom modifier. You regain all uses when you finish a short or long rest. So again, a lot of Blood Hunter abilities are recharged on a short or long rest, as opposed to just a long rest. So this is the same thing, and it's based on your wisdom mod. So again, it's another thing that you want a high wisdom modifier for. The Ghost Slayer relies on a high wisdom modifier for a lot of its abilities. 15th level, you get what's called Gravesite. This one is super useful for a number of reasons. First things first, it allows you to see magical darkness up to 30 feet. That is a big deal. There currently in the game, there are only two other ways to get the ability to see in magical darkness. They are Devil Sight from, it's an Eldritch invocation that Warlocks get, or Shadow Sorcerers, if they cast darkness with, they're able to cast darkness using their sorcery points. They burn 2 sorcery points to cast darkness. They can see in that magical darkness if they use sorcery points to cast it, not if they cast it normally. So that's an interesting thing, because magical darkness in itself is a very limiting thing. There are very few creatures that can see in magical darkness unless they have some kind of other sense. Things like tremor sense or true sight, something like that. But creatures that have that are relatively few and far in between, and there's ways to get around it. So that's a really big deal. It's one of the reasons it takes 15 levels to get that high, because it's a big deal. And then the other half of it is you can see invisible creatures and objects up to 30 feet. So invisibility doesn't work on you anymore. And that's a big deal as well. As you get to higher levels, things like greater invisibility can be an incredibly useful thing for a spellcaster to have prepared, because they can cast it on themselves and then they can just go wherever they want. No one can see them, and they can cast spells. And greater invisibility doesn't end until you fail a concentration check, or you it gets dispelled somehow, or it ends. It lasts for a minute. So the ability to see invisible creatures is a really big deal. My understanding, I believe, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I believe this is the only class that actually has a built-in feature that allows you to see invisible creatures. So again, that's another thing, and that's again part of the Ghost Slayer thing. Is ghosts and things like that, and things like invisible stalkers, which is an elemental. But there's a lot of undead creatures in general that are that get the ability to turn invisible in that. And so this is really built around that idea of, no, screw undead, I'm going to kill them all. And then the final thing you get is probably the most interesting class feature I think I've seen. And part of me thinks it's just that hair's breadth off of broken. It's kind of like a rogue, where it's just that hair's breadth off of broken. But what it is when you hit 18th level, whenever you hit 0 hit points, you can choose to let your soul emerge from your body and fight on. What that means is you get knocked unconscious and your soul gets back up and goes, bitch, please. At the beginning of your next turn, you manifest as a spirit form in your space that picks up your weapons and continues fighting on. Basically, you can fight on while you're unconscious. You still have to make death saves and things like that while you're unconscious. If your body dies, the thing goes away, and if the thing takes any damage whatsoever, it disappears. If your spirit form takes any damage whatsoever, it disappears. But you can do your Crimson Rites. You don't take any damage from your Crimson Rite, so you can activate your Crimson Rite and do that, and you can do all your blood curses. You can do everything you could when you were conscious. You just are a spirit. And, you can go and kill and stuff like that, which, again, is really, really interesting and very much in the idea of blood hunters. I will, imbue this darkness so I can overcome it. Hey, ghost slayers. I slay ghosts. Might as well become one in order to kill them. So it's really, really interesting. The kind of limiting factor of it is if it disappears, all your gear and items and weapons and everything just drop right where it disappeared. So when you wake up, you will have no weapons. I believe you keep your armor. It doesn't take your armor, but you won't have any weapons on you when you wake up or anything like that if you have this. So it's one of those things that, again, it gives you choices. Do I want to do this and then have to spend a turn going and finding my weapons and everything? Or do I want to just focus on, not failing my death saves? And there's no limit, at least when I'm reading here. And again, if I'm missing that, just correct me in the comments below. But there's no limit to how many times you can do this. It says whenever your hit points drop to 0, you can choose to let your soul emerge from your body and fight on. So yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting aspect of it, and it's at a just quick glance at it, it looks like something that's just massively broken. But when you take into account that any damage gets rid of it, and also if the spirit is significantly far away from the body, it means that if the person does wake up, they don't have any weapons. It's not quite as powerful as it seems. A single, even something as simple as a first level Burning Hands spell that affects the area that the spirit is in would kill the spirit. There's nothing it can do, because even if it made its dex save on half damage, it would get it would still take some damage and be gone. And even with blood curses and things like that, since it's a spell save and not an attack roll, there's no way for it to just get rid of that. The other thing is, if you try to amplify a blood curse or anything in it, you would instantly whisk out anyway, because it says Crimson Rite feature doesn't hurt you. Amplifying your blood curse would still hurt you. So anyway, so that's the Ghost Slayer. The next one is Order of the Profane Soul. This one gets some people kind of upset with it, because what this does is this kind of makes a Blood Hunter Warlock hybrid. And there are I've seen people say flat out, Order of the Profane Soul makes Warlock completely useless. It doesn't. They're very, very different classes with very, very different ways to play. The class actually fits into the lore and the idea of the Blood Hunter really well. Again, the Blood Hunter decides to imbue the darkness around him so that he can better attack and defeat the darkness. That is literally what a Warlock does. For power, a Warlock agrees to a pact with a really powerful creature. It exchanges its freedom and a portion of its soul in order to gain power, in order to do the things it wants. I mean, it's very much a blood hunter kind of thing. So I am going to kind of show the differences as much as I can between the Order of the Profane Soul and just a generic Warlock, to show how they are very, very different. But this is a Warlock Blood Hunter hybrid is what it is. And it also means there's very little reason, if any, for a Blood Hunter to ever multi-class into Warlock. Which would also be annoying because Warlocks are Charisma casters and Blood Hunters are Wisdom casters. So that would make them have to have even more spread of good ability scores. So anyway, so the first thing that happens, at 3rd level, you strike a bargain with an otherworldly being of your choice. The Archfey, the Fiend, the Great Old One, the Undying, the Hex Blade, or the Celestial. And those are all of the different packs that have been released, from everything from the Player's Handbook all the way through Sword Coast Adventures Guide and Xanathar's Guide to everything. Mercer, his most recent update, put stuff for all of those in here. So you can take whatever pack you want. And you get special stuff because of it. First of all, you get pack magic. It works the same way it does with Warlocks, where you get a number of spell slots, and they're all of a certain spell level, and they recharge on a short rest. It's the exact same thing that Warlocks have. The difference is Blood Hunters have a lot less spell slots for the most part. At max level, they only have 3, whereas Warlocks have 4, and I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. And Warlocks get up to 5th level spells, whereas Profane Souls only get 4th level or spell slots, and then they get less cantrips too. Warlocks are a very cantrip-based spellcasting class. Because they have so few spell slots, they use cantrips like crazy, and their cantrip use is also augmented by their extra abilities that I can't remember right now. But they have all these things that they get at level 2 that let them modify a lot of different cantrips and things like that. So they are a very cantrip-focused class. This is still a melee, or this is still a weapon-based class that gets some spells. So compare this kind of like Eldritch Knight to Wizard is the same Profane Soul to Warlock. They get some of the same things, but they're limited. It also tells you how many spells you know. When you level up, you can replace a spell with another spell, blah, 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 blah. And it's all Warlock spell list, but you use Wisdom for your spell casting. You know, standard spell casting. The other thing you get at 3rd level is what you get is called Right Focus. Your weapon becomes core to your pact with your chosen Dark Patron, while you have an active right, so you have to have a Crimson Right active on your chosen weapon. You can use your weapon as a spellcasting focus, which is a big deal. Spellcasting focus allows you to ignore material components for spells unless they have an actual value, and can do a lot of other things. And especially if you're using a shield or if you're dual wielding, you generally have to have a way to do the somatic components of a spell. And so having your weapon as your spellcasting focus will also mean that you can do the somatic components of your spellcasting as well. So it's a big deal. Your chosen pact also enhances your right. So this is the thing that I think is really, really cool about this class, is that Matt went through the time to pick each different pact you could choose and give it something special that makes it different. So you can have a bunch of different profane souls in a party, and each one's going to play very, very differently. So with the Archfey, if you deal right damage to a creature, A creature loses any half or three-quarters cover bonuses, as well as invisibility, until the beginning of your next turn. So this is a really useful thing, first of all, for ranged blood hunters. And it's something that helps the rest of your party as well. So if you can hit them and do right damage to them, they lose cover bonuses, which can be a massive, massive thing. Because a three-quarter cover bonus is a +5 to their AC. So just by hitting them once, they lose 5 to their AC. And that's for the rest of your party until the beginning of your next turn. It's a very, very useful thing. The Fiend, while using the Rite of the Flame, if you roll a 1 on your right damage die, you may re-roll the die. You may only re-roll once per attack. The Fiend is really, really fire-based, so you'll be using a lot of fire. That's how it works. The Great Old One, whenever you deal a critical hit on a creature, the creature must make a Wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failure, the creature is frightened of you until the end of your next turn. Another thing that's very thematic. The Great Old Ones are these, again, Lovecraftian style creatures that are so old and forgotten that they can drive people mad and things like that. Think Cthulhu. So this, you hit them with a critical hit, and they freak the hell out and are frightened of you, which means they get disadvantage against attack rolls against you if they do, and they can't move closer to you. So if you even just take one step back, they can't actually move closer to you while they're frightened. They can circle around you as much as they want, but they cannot move closer to you. So, kind of useful there. The Undying, when you reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points with a weapon attack and kill it, that's a really big part, you regain hit points equal to your Crimson Right damage die. The reason they put in and kill it is because it'd be really easy to abuse this by just reducing something to 0 hit points, bring it back with like a healing word or something, hit it, and then you just, have this free heal. That can get pretty high. So you do have to kill the creature. Now, most DMs will run it where monsters, once they hit 0, they don't roll death saves. They just die. So in general, this is only going to come up in very specific circumstances. But he put that little bit in there just to avoid abuse. So that's the Undying. The Celestial. You could expend one use of your Blood Maledict feature as a bonus action to heal one creature within 60 feet of you. They regain hit points equal to twice your Crimson Right damage die rolled. They regain hit points equal to your Crimson Right damage die rolled twice plus your Wisdom modifier. So 2 Crimson Right dies plus your Wisdom. Which basically means once you get up to the D10, which is I think it's 17 or 18, you can do 2d10 plus probably 5. 2d10 plus 5 heal at range. That is the most powerful ranged healing spell in the game. And Blood Maledict, again, you get those back on a short rest. So the Celestial will turn you into very much a very good combat healer. That can just get people up with a bonus action and still do all the cool Blood Hunter stuff with your action. So, yeah, really, really cool thing. And then the Hex Blade, this is the one where you would see the most overlap, because the Hex Blade is a melee version of the Warlock. And so the Hex Blade and then Profane Soul are going to have a lot of overlap, and this is what's going to kind of change how things work. So whenever you target a creature with a blood curse, your next attack against the cursed creature, is a critical hit on a roll of 19 or 20 on the d20. So again, this is to build into that idea of blood curses and hurting yourself to do damage. You can blood curse someone, and then you have expanded criticals, which is, again, a really, really big deal. Especially since with spells on this one, you can do Hex and other things like that just add additional dice. So yeah, so that's all of the ooze. Mystic Frenzy, beginning at 7th level, when you use your action to cast a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack as a bonus action. This is something that you see in a couple different things. I think the Blade Singer has it. I think the Hex Blade has something similar to it. It basically is when you have someone that uses swords and magic, they need the ability to kind of be able to do both. And again, the Blood Hunter is built on melee attacks. They are more reliant on melee attacks than even... or just weapon attacks in general, than the Hex Blade because of their Crimson Rite. This makes it so you can use cantrips, which, if you're using Sword Coast Adventures Guide, they have cantrips that allow you to make melee attacks, so you would get Crimson Rite damage on it, and then make one weapon attack as a bonus action after you cast the cantrip. So, again, it's designed to kind of blend that spellcraft and swordplay into the same thing. The other thing you get at 7th level is what's called Revealed Arcana. You get access to an additional spell. It doesn't give you an additional spell slot, you just have an additional spell. Archfey gets Blur, Fiend gets Scorching Ray, Great Old One gets Detect Thoughts, the Undying gets Blindness Deafness, the Celestial gets Lesser Restoration, and the Hexblade gets Branding Smite. Very, very simple. You add an additional spell to your spell list based on your your pact, which is a very warlock thing to do. Normal warlocks get that as well, so it fits the class very, very well. The 11th level ability is really interesting, to say the least. And again, this fits into the idea of that spellcraft and swordplay merging together. At 11th level, you can temporarily infuse your rights with the seed of a powerful spell. As an action, you can imbue your right enhanced weapon with one spell you can cast or is already active, then make a single attack with that weapon. If that attack hits, all spell attack rolls for the imbued spell hit the target automatically and are considered part of the single weapon attack. The target takes weapon damage and is subject to the effects of the spell, expending a spell slot accordingly. If the attack has advantage, the target's initial saving throw against the spell has disadvantage. So you still have to make saving throws. That would be part of the spell. If the attack misses, the spell has no effects. Area spells originate from the target space. So what this means is you can cast, as an action, you cast a spell into your blade and make a weapon attack at the same time. So you get a full weapon attack with Crimson Rite damage and everything, plus the effects of a spell, all in it. The limitations to this is the spell must be a 1st level or higher, and have a casting time of 1 action or require an action to activate an already active concentration spell. So with things like, if we go back up to the Fiend, with Scorching Ray, if you cast Scorching Ray at 4th level, it's a 2nd level spell that makes 3 rays of fire come out. At 3rd level, it's 4 rays. At 4th level, it's 5 rays. But you have to roll for each one. With this, you would cast Scorching Ray into your weapon. You would attack. If you hit, all the Scorching Rays hit all at once. Just like that, you've just maximized an unbelievably high amount of damage. And if you happened to crit on it, you are doing just crazy amounts of damage. And then anything with a spell save, if you can find a way to get advantage, like which one was it? Anyway, if you can find a way to get advantage on the attack, then they're going to have disadvantage on their save against it. So it can be very, very useful for a bunch of different spells. But again, it's that thing of combining sorcery and swordplay into one. And again, it requires you to have your right on. So all of these things really require you to have the right on. So they fit into that idea of you have to damage yourself in order to do extra damage, in order to do cool things. So it's a really interesting thing. I've never had a Profane Soul Blood Hunter at one of my tables, so I don't know how this works in practice. I don't know how broken it is in practice. It doesn't feel massively broken. Again, it's one of those things that just seems a hair's breadth off of it, but I'd have to see it in action quite a few times to really be able to make a judgment. Other than just reading it, it sounds like a really interesting choice that you can decide to make. Because again, you have to use your action to do that, so you lose your multi-attack that you could have used. You lose anything else you would have had to use your action for, including if you're two-weapon fighting. Because you're using action to do this, you can't make a bonus attack, bonus action attack with your offhand weapon because you have to take the attack action, and this is different. So again, it adds choices. It doesn't force you to do this. And again, with a limited number of spell slots, it is a big choice. Do I want to sacrifice making 2 or maybe even 3 attacks for the chance that this could do crazy amounts of damage? At 15th level, they get just another set of spells. Archfey gets Slow, Fiend gets Fireball, Great Old One gets Haste, Undying gets Bestow Curse, Celestial gets Revivify, Hex Blade gets Blink. Again, same thing as level 7. They're just extra spells that they get. And then finally, at 18th level, you get what's called Soul Siphon. This one really, really fits into kind of the Blood Hunter lore and everything of, you know, I imbue part of the darkness in order to be able to kill the darkness. With this, when you reduce a creature to 0 hit points with an attack, kill the creature, and they have a challenge rating of 15 or above, you recover an expended spell slot. So it's an 18th level ability. So it makes sense that it requires a challenge rating of 15 or above, but this is a way for you to regain spell slots in combat. Challenge rating 15 creatures are rough. These are some of the more powerful creatures. Most players don't tend to deal with challenge rating 15 creatures, much less multiple ones in a single day. I believe a vampire is challenge rating 15 if it's got spells. The big baddies, like the really rough guys, get to the challenge rating 15 level. So this is a pretty big thing, but you get one of your spell slots back, which you can use for, again, all those different things that we've talked about. So when talking about this compared to a warlock, again, a lot of people say, well, this is just vastly superior to a warlock in every way, shape, or form. And why would you ever play a warlock when you can do this? Well, there's a number of reasons. One, warlocks are charisma-based, so not only do they get to attack with use their charisma modifier instead of wisdom, that also means that they're going to be able to do other charisma-based things well. Things like deception, persuasion, and intimidation are all things that warlocks are actually remarkably good at because they have a naturally high charisma score. The other thing warlocks get, again, warlocks are made for casting cantrips. They get other spells, but they get so few uses of them that casting cantrips is what they're doing most of the time. And then they'll cast a spell every so often. They'll cast maybe 1 spell per combat encounter, maybe 2. But for the rest of their turns, they're casting cantrips. The Hex Blade, or the Profane Soul isn't. It is based on, the Blood Hunter has to be making attacks with its weapon to be getting its Crimson Right damage. The multi-attack means that anytime it uses a cantrip to cast instead of multi-attack, it's losing out. With the fact that it can dual wield and have 2 rights going on both, one on each weapon, casting cantrips instead of using the attack action means they could also be potentially losing out on their offhand attacks and things like that. So they are very, very different. And then the other thing that makes Warlocks different is starting at, I think it's 11th level or something, they get one 6th level spell, and then as they get higher, they'll get a 7th level spell, an 8th level spell, and a 9th level spell. They only get one of each of those levels, but that's how Warlocks get really high level stuff that does crazy awesome stuff. The rest, so not only do Warlocks have, at max level, they have 4 spell slots that are 5th level. They also have one 6th level slot, one 7th level slot, one 8th level slot, and one 9th level slot that are specifically for a specific spell that they learn. So again, Warlocks have a lot more spells they get access to. Warlocks are very much based on the idea of casting cantrips, and they can modify and kind of mold their cantrips and their characters based on whatever it is that they get at 2nd level that I still can't remember, that I'm going to look up because that's how much it annoys me that I can't remember what it's called. That is Wizard. Warlock is right next to it. Eldritch Invocations. That's what they're called. Dear Lord, I couldn't remember that. I can't believe I couldn't remember that. So yeah, they get Eldritch Invocations, which modify cantrips and things like that, and modify how they play their character, whereas a Profane Soul doesn't. They're still a Blood Hunter. They're always going to be a Blood Hunter. They're going to be using their Crimson Rite. They're going to be using Blood Curses and things like that. They just also get a little bit of magic in there, and it fits with the class. The final one, and we're going on 46 minutes now. The final one in the original document is called Order of the Mutant. If you have played the Witcher series, this is a Witcher. Hands down, that's what it is. It doesn't use any terminology that could be linked with Witchers for copyright reasons. This is a Witcher. And as I describe the things here, you will understand why this is a Witcher. So Order of the Mutant is based on the idea that original thing that turned you into a Blood Hunter, called the Hunter's Bane, is this potion that you drink that permanently scars you, that changes you, that turns you into part monster. The mutants, the Order of the Mutants, really embraces that idea of, hey, I can use chemicals and poison to change how my body works and to really control how my body does stuff. So that's what the Order of the Mutant is based on, is this idea of I create potions and things like that in order to make myself more powerful. If you've ever played the Witcher series, especially if you've played The Witcher 3, one of the things that you learn very, very quickly is if you just run into combat without any preparation, you're going to just get killed. Even by really easy creatures, you're going to get killed. However, if you use oils on your blade, if you study the creature you're going to be killing, and if you use certain potions that I can't remember what they call them, you are going to just plow through these guys. So a little bit of prep work means that makes a combat go from almost impossible to remarkably simple. Just based on that. And that's really what the Order of the Mutant is based on. Remember I mentioned that knowledge is power thing, is a really big thing for Blood Hunters in general. Order of the Mutant exemplifies that completely. And they do it with these things called formulas. At 3rd level, you can choose to learn 3 Mutagen Formulas. The mutagens, I'll talk about them at the end of all this, but basically each one will give you a benefit and then a side effect. The side effects are negatives, the benefits are positive. And they massively change how you play the character. Like, oh my god, massive, massive, massive change. So they're really, really cool. And again, you learn 3 mutagen formulas, and then you gain additional formulas at 7th, 11th, 15th, and 18th. And also, when you learn a new one, you can forget an old one and replace it with a different one. So if you chose poorly at 3rd level and you're just never using one of them, when you reach 7th level, you can replace one of your old ones with a different one in addition to learning a new one. Which, again, very, very common. And then in order to use these, at third level, you can take a short rest to concoct a single mutagen. Consuming a mutagen requires a bonus action. So again, you have to know that action economy. You're going to use a bonus action for this. And the effects, including side effects, last until you complete a short or long rest to meditate and flush the toxins from your system. So basically, these mutagens, when you use them and drink them, they last until it's not like they last for a minute or an hour or something like that. They last until you rest, until your next rest. So planning ahead is a really, really important aspect of the mutants, Blood Hunter Order of the Mutants, because if you prepare yourself using like one of the mutagens gives you resistance to bludgeoning damage but weakness to slashing damage. If you know you're going to be up against a bunch of people using hammers and stuff like that, it is in your best interest to prepare that, drink it, and then go into battle, and you're taking half damage for the entire time because they're just beating you with bludgeoning weapons. Whereas if you do that and you accidentally get into, you know, a battle with pirates, you're vulnerable to slashing damage. They're using their cutlasses and just shredding you to pieces. So again, the more the Order of the Mutant prepares and the more that they learn, the better they're going to be able to do. And the fact that you can only create one potion per short rest, and the other thing about this is the mutagens lose their potency after you take another short rest. So it's not like you can take 3 short rests and prepare a bunch of them. No, the next time you take a short rest, the mutagen is gone and you can make a new one. You eventually get the ability to create more mutagens in a short rest or a long rest. Or actually, no, it's just a short rest. You can't do it on long rest. You eventually get the ability to make more at the same time, but they always will wear off after a rest. The other thing that you have to take into account is what's called your Mutation Score, which is your Blood Hunter level divided by 4 rounded up. So at level 3, when you get this, your Mutagen Score would be 1, because 3 divided by 4 is 0.75, round that up to 4. When you get to level 5, your Mutagen Score will be 2, because 5 divided by 4 is 1.25, round that up to 2. So that's how that is. There's a few mutagens that actually use your Mutation Score, but it's not used anywhere near as much as you would think with how it's kind of presented in here. So that's 3rd level. 7th level, this is when you get to create more mutagens. 7th level, you could take a short rest. You can create 2. They have to be different formulas and can be ingested with overlasting effects that last until you finish your next short or long rest. So this is where you really start becoming mad scientist, and you can mix mutagens. You can go, well, this one and we put them in. You get both of the benefits and both of the side effects. So again, this is another thing that's based on that idea of I'm going to hurt myself in order to be able to hurt the others. This is a perfect example of it. Every mutagen you ingest has a negative side effect, and some of them are brutal. Some of them can really, really screw you up. So this, again, adds a lot of choice to it. And then when you reach 15th level, you can create 3 mutagens during a short rest. So really a lot of customizability based on this, and a lot of ability to again, if you prep before you go out, before you start fighting, you can really change the tide of battle because of these mutagens. 11th level, you get, I think, probably the best thing about the Order of the Mutant. It's called Strange Metabolism. You can use a bonus action starting at level 11 to instill a burst of adrenaline to temporarily resist the negative effects of a mutagen. Basically, you can ignore the side effects of a mutagen affecting you for 1 minute. And once you use that feature, you have to finish a short or long rest before you can use it again. This is a big deal. Like I said, some of the side effects are doozies and really, really hurts. With this, You use a bonus action, you no longer have one of the side effects, which can be a huge, huge deal, and can really change things in your favor. So yeah, that's really, really cool. 15th level, they get what's called Robust Physiology. Basically, you're immune to poison damage and the poison condition. This is something that monks get, I think, at like 8th or 9th level. I think paladins get it as well. It's a very common thing for dungeon masters in general. Once you get to high levels, using any kind of poison damage or the poison condition generally is not something you do a ton of, because there's so many classes that eventually get immunity or at least resistance to poison damage and the poison condition. So yeah, poison is generally a low-level thing. And this, again, it really fits in with the lore of the class of you are constantly putting poison into your body. Eventually, because you're doing, like, super poison is what you're ingesting. So eventually regular poison, you're like, psh, who cares? So that's the 15th level ability. Still very, very useful. Things like an ancient green dragon, their breath weapon is poison. And it does a crap ton of damage. You are completely immune to the breath weapon of an ancient green dragon, which is a super powerful creature. You're just immune to their breath weapon. They can still slash you, stomp you, bite you, but they can't use their breath weapon on you, which is a big deal. And the poison condition is a rough one. Everything, you have disadvantage on everything while you're poisoned. So yeah, it still is useful, but it is not a unique thing to blood hunters. Like, again, like I said, monks get it. Paladins, I think, get a version of it. And the final thing that you get for the Order of the Mutant is Exulted Mutation. At 18th level, your body has begun producing one of your toxins naturally. Choose one of your known mutagen formulas. You gain the benefits and side effects of this mutagen permanently, at all times. You cannot change this choice of formula after this feature is acquired. So what that means is one of these things is going to become permanent. You never have to ingest it. It's just always happening. Which, again, by the time you reach level 18 with this character, you should know them well enough that you know the mutagen, and you're like, okay, this is the one I'm always using, so this one is going to become permanent now. The fact that you also get the side effect of that mutagen permanently is interesting. It didn't used to be that way. I believe it used to be you became immune to side effects. I know at one version of this class you got immune to all side effects of it, which was just massively overpowered. Now you don't get immune to any side effects except for, for a minute once per short rest. But again, that frees you up so you can have other mutagens that you can mix and match and do all this crazy stuff. So these are the mutagens. I'll do a real quick once over what they do. And yeah. So the first mutagen is called, I pronounce this Aether, but I've seen it pronounced Ether far too many times, and I believe that's actually the correct pronunciation. It's Aether, which doesn't make sense for it to be pronounced Ether, especially since if you remove the A, it's already a word. Ether is a word. Ether is a chemical. So I don't know why adding an A, like the A is silent or something like that. But anyway, so we'll call it Ether. You have to be 11th level to learn this mutagen, and you gain a flying speed of 20 feet is the benefit, but the side effect is you have disadvantage on all strength and dexterity ability checks. Now, that is ability checks, not saving throws. So being able to fly might really avoid a lot, like acrobatics you'd use to maybe like run along a wall or balance on a tightrope or something like that. When you can fly, you don't need to do that. Strength checks, breaking down a door, flying's not going to help you with that. But climbing is a strength athletics check. If you can fly, you don't need it. So a very, very cool thing, could be very useful if you're a melee blood hunter. The flying is going to be, you know, a little this and that. It could be useful if you're fighting flying bad guys. If you're fighting people that are on the ground, it's not going to be as useful. So again, that preparation is really, really useful here. Celerity, your dexterity score is increased by an amount equal to equal to your mutation score. So that's one of the ones where your mutation score becomes actually useful. Once you get to 20th level, your mutation score is 5. So your dexterity score increases by an amount equal to your mutation score, as does your dexterity maximum. So that means your dex can go up to 25. Side effect, your wisdom score is decreased by an amount equal to your mutation score. That's the one thing that I really think makes Celerity a really, really difficult sell, depending on how you play your Blood Hunter. If you are very much a Blood Hunter that is always just going in and making attacks and not using too many of the blood curses that require saving throws and stuff like that, where your wisdom matters, it won't hurt you to have your wisdom score decreased. But because so many other things are based on your wisdom score, again, this is a very big choice. Conversant, you get advantage on intelligence ability checks. You get disadvantage on charisma ability checks. Again, very much a give and take. But again, intelligence ability checks could be used to learn information about creatures in order to remember things. Again, knowledge is power. This could be very, very useful to you. Cruelty. It also intelligence. Intelligence investigation is what you use to find traps. So if you want to be the super findy trap person, that's a great way to do it. Cruelty is another one where you have to be 11th level. You can make a single weapon attack as a bonus action on each of your turns. That is different than like 2-weapon fighting and stuff like that. 2-weapon fighting, you have to take the attack action in order to make a bonus action attack. With Cruelty, you can make a single weapon attack as a bonus action on every turn, which is very useful. Side effect, you have disadvantage on all saving throws. Very bad. But that also means if you're a strength-based Blood Hunter and you're using like a great sword or a great axe or something like that, or a glaive, that means that now you get an additional attack. You already have multi-attack with it, and you get a third attack while still having a really massive weapon. This one works really, really well for strength-based Blood Hunters. And like I said, the disadvantage on saving throws really, really sucks. But yeah, you kind of the thing you're thinking there is, I'm going to kill them before they can make me make a saving throw. Impermeable, you regain resistance to piercing damage. Side effect, you gain vulnerability to slashing damage. There are 3 versions of this thing. Each one gives you piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning resistance or vulnerability. They're a rock, paper, scissors kind of thing. We'll come to the other ones later. But again, this is that one is very much about know your target. You know, if you know that your target uses a rapier, this is a really useful thing, because they're going to be doing piercing damage every time they hit you with the rapier. So having resistance to that is really good. However, if you think they use a rapier, but instead they use a longsword does slashing damage, you would get vulnerability to slashing damage. They'd be doing double damage against you. So knowledge is power, especially with this one in particular. Order of the Mutant is knowledge is power. Prepare. Mobility. You gain immunity to the grappled and restrained condition. Massively useful. And at 11th level, you are also immune to the paralyzed condition. This is such a useful thing, because paralyzed is such a dangerous thing to have. And grappled and restrained are things that monsters get often. There are a lot of monsters that will grapple you, and while you're grappled, you're restrained. Having immunity to it is super, super useful, and basically, especially with the paralyzed condition, there are a lot of spellcasters who will use paralysis spells to deal with the worst guys, because when you're paralyzed, any melee attack made against you within 5 feet is an auto crit if it hits. So, yeah, paralysis is a really easy way to get rid of your most powerful characters like that. So having being immune to it after 11th level is really, really good. Side effect, you gain a penalty to initiative equal to 2 times your mutation score. So the interesting thing about that is if you wait to take the mobility until after you've rolled initiative, at least for that combat, the side effect doesn't really affect you. For every combat after that, until you take a short rest, you will you'll have a pretty low initiative. You will go pretty low in initiative order. But yeah, if you do it after combat starts, you've already rolled your initiative. You don't have to re-roll it. So that one's an interesting one. Night Eye, you gain dark vision for up to 60 feet if you already have dark vision. This increases its range to, by 60 feet, but you gain sunlight sensitivity. This, again, really useful if, first of all, if you are a creature that doesn't naturally have dark vision. This can be super, super useful. The other thing it can be useful for, if you are a ranged blood hunter, having... because generally you'll have 60 feet of dark vision for most things. If you're a drow, you get 120 feet. Having an additional 60 feet, so going from 120 to 180, or even just 60 to 120, longbows and even short bows, that's still well... with longbows, your short range is 200. So being able to shoot someone and see them in pitch blackness from almost 200 feet away, or even just 120 feet away, is a big deal. Most spells will max out at 90 to 100 feet. There's only a few that get up to 120. So if you're a dark elf blood hunter with Night Eye on, you already have sunlight sensitivity because you're a dark elf, but you now have 180 foot dark vision. You can hit things from almost 200 feet away, and they can't see you because even monsters aren't really going to have dark vision that far away. So, very useful. Potency, your strength score is increased by amount equal to your mutation score, as does your strength maximum. It's the same thing as the dex one. This one, the side effect, your dexterity score is decreased by an amount equal to your mutation score. Now, this is where I have a slight problem. Dexterity lowers your wisdom. If you want high dexterity as a blood hunter, that means you're a dex-based blood hunter, but you also need a high wisdom score. So making you sacrifice your wisdom score for a higher dexterity score makes sense to me. For this one, if you're a strength-based blood hunter, you probably don't use your dexterity score almost at all. So it really won't matter if they drop your dex score even more. You're still going to have a high wisdom score, which you need for most of your blood curses. And now you're going to have a really high strength score. So that's the one thing that I'm not particularly fond of. Either I would change something, like maybe make dexterity... like I would much rather see strength and dexterity be flipped so that your dexterity goes up and your strength goes down. And then for this one, your strength goes up and your dex goes down. Or both of them affect wisdom. Because again, wisdom, strength and wisdom, or dex and wisdom are the two things you need for a blood hunter. And when one of these affects wisdom and the other one doesn't, it just doesn't seem right to me. But that's how it is. Precision, this is another 11th level. Your weapon attack score critical hit on a 19 or 20. Side effect, all healing you received is halved. So that one, again, it's rough because you're not going to be getting as much healing. But when you're critting on a 19 or 20, you're doing a lot of damage. And if you combine that with other things in here, like, you're doing crazy, crazy stuff. Rapidity, your speed is increased by 15 feet. At 15th level, your speed is increased by 20 feet. Side effect, you have disadvantage on all dexterity ability checks. Now again, remember, ability checks is different than saving throws. And having an extra 15 feet speed is really useful. If you've taken the movement feat or something like that, there's a feat that adds to your movement. It also means anytime you make an attack, they can't make attacks back at you. And then you also get rapidity. You can just run between people, beating them up and then running away, and they never get a chance to touch you. You become super, super fast. Sonic. Reconstruction, prerequisite, this has to be 7th level. While conscious and in combat, those are the two big things there, you regenerate hit points equal to 2 times your mutation score at the start of your turn as long as you are above 0 hit points. Side effect, your speed decreases by 10 feet. So you get a little bit slower, but you get regen. And it's 2 times your mutation score. So again, at max level, your mutation score is 5. So you regain 10 hit points per turn. Which doesn't sound like a lot, especially when at that point you probably have over 100 hit points. But it can be a big deal where every turn you're getting more and more hit points. And regeneration in general is a very, very useful thing. It means your healer doesn't have to worry about you as much. If you combine that with other things on there that makes it harder for you to get hurt, yeah, you become super, super great. Saga City is how I'm going to pronounce it. Your wisdom score increases by an amount equal to your mutation score, as does your wisdom maximum. Side effect, your armor class is reduced by an amount equal to your mutation score. Again, this is another one that just seems a little bit weird, but this one seems slightly more balanced. Instead of getting an ability score, it actually reduces your armor class, which is a big deal, especially if you're a melee. If you are a melee based blood hunter. So yeah, reducing your armor class is always a bad thing, but again, increasing your wisdom score means you can do more things with blood maledict. You can your blood curses are significantly harder to deal with, things like that. Yeah, wisdom always useful. And if you have a little bit lower armor class, not the worst thing in the world. Shielded, you gain resistance to slashing damage. Side effect, you gain vulnerability to bludgeoning damage. Again, remember that trifecta I talked about? Rock, paper, scissors. Shielded is the second one. The third one is Unbreakable. You gain resistance to bludgeoning damage. Side effect, you gain vulnerability to piercing damage. Again, this is a rock, paper, scissors trio. That's what I would have liked to see for potency, celerity, and sagacity. I would like to see a rock, paper, scissors type thing with them. But he decided to go a different way. But that's exactly what Shielded, Unbreakable, and Impermeable are, is just rock, paper, scissors. Do you want resistance to piercing damage, slashing damage, or bludgeoning damage? And again, it's all based on do your prep work, know what your enemy is going to be before you get into a fight in with them. Again, to make your mutagens, you only need an hour. So you can go all the way through the dungeon, and once you get ready to fight the bad guy, take a short rest. Everybody can heal up and everything. You make your concoction, and if you've scouted the bad guy, you know what he's going to do to you. And then the final mutagen is Wariness. You get a bonus to initiative equal to 2 times your mutation score. Side effect, you have disadvantage on wisdom perception checks. So you act quickly, but you're not very perceptive. Again, if you want to be one of the first people to act in combat, which can be a major advantage, especially if you are imbuing multiple mutagens at that point, you can do some pretty crazy damage before they get a chance to even act by just having a really high initiative roll. And then, losing or getting disadvantage on your perception check sucks, but you still might do pretty well. So anyway, that is the Blood Hunter subclasses. Like I said, I think they all kind of fit into that idea of I hurt myself in order to damage the bad people. Each one gets a little bit different focus. Again, the Ghost Slayer is basically fuck you undead. The Profane Soul takes the idea of I imbue the darkness in order to kill the darkness to a whole new level and adds in a little bit of magic beyond what they call blood magic. They reference blood curses as blood magic, This gets you just regular old arcane magic, and can be really cool. And then Order of the Mutants Witcher. You're a Witcher. It's what you are. It's super cool. I'm not knocking that one. I think it's a really interesting class, and it gives you a lot of really great choices as to how you want to play the class. But yeah, you're a Witcher, and you're super cool. So yeah, I hope you guys like this. Please, if you can, like I said in my last video, I am sticking with this YouTube thing. I got the new camera and everything for it, but again, I'm not able to create content nearly enough for me to really be able to grow the way other channels would grow. So if you can share this as much as you can, that makes it easier for me to grow and things like that. I still need more subscribers and more views and watch time if I'm ever going to make it back up to partner status. The other thing, and I have to say this, and I feel bad because I've seen fans and I've talked to fans that say that this particular person that I'm not going to name simply because I think it'd be kind of petty, normally makes really good content. But there was a video that released shortly after mine. If you type in Blood Hunter to YouTube, it's the first video that comes up. And it was called how to play a Blood Hunter or something like that. And they got so much of the class wrong. They gave completely incorrect information. They did it in a very humorous way. But the things that they said were just blatantly wrong. And that just irks me because theirs is like a 10-minute video. And their channel has over 50,000 subscribers, and the video itself has over 70,000 views. I sit here and do crap tons of work, and I have less than 300 subs, and I get like maybe 30 views on any of these videos. So if you can share this video and just get it out there a little bit more, I'd really appreciate it. If for nothing else, then to make sure that accurate information is getting out there instead of just blatant... I don't want to call them lies because I don't think this person did it intentionally. I think they just didn't read the class or don't understand how to interpret classes in general or something like that. Again, I've talked to other fans of this person, and they said that their how to play certain classes is generally a lot more informative, but it is designed to be more humorous than it is informative. But this one was just blatantly just over and over and over again. Wrong, that's not possible, that's not possible, that's not possible. And they didn't really go into anything about the subclasses like I'm doing here. So I'd really like to see my content get out there to a wider audience. So please share this, like it, comment on it, all that stuff makes it easier for people to find. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. It really does mean a lot, and it's one of the things that's preventing me from being able to monetize this stuff. And if I could monetize my YouTube stuff and actually make money from YouTube, again, they never actually paid me the money they said they were going to pay me. So if I can actually make some money off of this, I can start upgrading other things like my microphone, like my setup, maybe even get a green screen or something like that. All that stuff costs money. And if I can't monetize my channel, then I can't really do anything. So, yeah, please like, comment, subscribe, share, blah, 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 blah. And in the comments below, again, if there's another class that you want me to take a look at, even if it's not written by Matt Mercer, let me know. Send a link, either just put the title in the description. I can look it up on the DMs Guild. With how YouTube's set up, I'm not sure if you can post links in the chat or if I have to approve them or anything. So probably just the best way would be, hey, check out this class by this author, and I'll look it up. And as long as either I can download it for free or it's not an exorbitant amount of money, I might pick it up and do another one of these on those as well. Otherwise, if you want me to go back to the Player's Handbook and start talking about those again, or do the other subclasses of Rogue that I haven't done, you know, whatever you guys want next, put in the comments below. Anyway, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.